Waterworks weirdo. Hi all, been meaning to share this for a while now. Growing up in a northeast city outside a major metropolitan area, there were plenty of neat field trips and tours to go on as a child. I was a boy around 4 or 5 in the early 90s, and still pretty quiet for my age as my next siblings would not be born for another year. One fall day, while it was wet outside, and we were visiting my grandmother, she decided to take me on a tour of the city's water treatment facility. This was as exciting as it sounds. At one stop inside the facility, the rain-coated crowd gathered around the tour guide, who appeared to be motioning towards a hole in the ground. Having just seen Free Willy, and with no working knowledge of marine habitats or municipal water systems, I was sure this was where Willy the killer whale lived. As the crowd strained to hear the guide, I slipped through some adults and walked away, stopping about 30 to 40 feet from the throng. There, a middle-aged white man approached me and stood between the group and I. He asked who I was with, and I told him, and then he asked if I wanted to go on a special tour with just him. I may have said yes, but I think I hesitated, because both tours sounded boring at this point. He told me it would be a secret, and we need to leave quickly. As he was looking around, the tour guide wrapped up his talking point, and the crowd headed our way. My grandmother found me just as the group enveloped me. I never did get molested, so a big shout out to my mom for impeccable timing. I didn't realize until many years later what a close call this incident was. The Ferret Playground Hobo. This happened when I was still in preschool, so the account is going to be pretty brief. Also, as a warning, not entirely sure if it is even true, because it seems so bizarre that I might have dreamt it, you know? When I was little, I went to this Baptist church-run preschool. Seriously hated going there because I'm pretty sure the principal hated my guts, but that's another story. They were pretty close to a very nice park, so that they would take us on field trips, too, every once in a while. While we were on these trips, we were not allowed to leave the fenced-in playground at the park, because it'd be too much work to actually watch us instead of letting us run wild. The park itself was composed of about 3 playgrounds, but only one of them had fencing. Since it was a public park, we wouldn't be the only people in the fenced-in area all the time. Most of the time, it was homeschooled kids, other preschools, and the occasional family taking their kids to the park while they were on break. Now, every now and then, there'd be an after-school program, or a random-ass man reading a newspaper, or a confused guy who'd mistaken the fenced-in area for a dog park. Then there'd be something odd. Then there was the ferret guy. Now, I'm not very sure how Ferret Guy got on the playground or why he wanted to be on the playground. All I knew was that he had a live ferret. Really, it's not a euphemism, that he was keeping in his jacket, and that he looked pretty rough. Now, since we were all bored kids, and the Ferret Guy, had a pretty adorable small animal hidden in his jacket pocket, we all just sort of swarmed him to get a good look at the adorable creature. Not the guy himself, but the ferret. Now, here's where it gets weird. We start asking why Ferret Guy was carrying his pet ferret around with him all the time, to which he replied that he and the ferret actually worked at the playground. Apparently, what that job was involved setting the ferret down slides to look for loose bolts and investigating the playground equipment for electrical wires. Now, this struck me as a little weird, even at that young age, but I didn't really get to ask questions, because after an hour of ignoring us, the daycare workers suddenly noticed that all the kids in a circle huddled around were talking to a crazy homeless guy with a ferret. He gave them pretty much the same story as well, which led them to basically say, okay, let's just let Ferret Guy get back to work then, okay? No, not entirely sure what happened to Ferret Hobo, who I was pretty sure was off his meds, but he was gone by the time that we left. There's a baseball field that I can take you to. What's up, guys? Just remembered this encounter I had when I was about 9 years old, and thought that I could maybe share it here. My parents usually take me and my siblings on numerous outdoor camping sites, and I've had great memories on those. Except for one particular outing that I remember. It was at the Poconos in Pennsylvania, where there were a lot of sites we went to. However, on this trip, we rented out cabins instead of pitching tents. I was okay with it. When we were all settled in our cabin, my parents and my siblings were inside, chatting away, talking, laughing, giggling, planning the weekend, and eating some food. But me, being a sporty kid, grabbed my baseball bat, took it out, grabbed some baseballs as well, and went outside to play. Now, in front of our cabin was a huge circle of just open grass. Big area. So, I threw some baseballs in the air and proceeded to hit them over there. About 10 minutes of doing this and having my fun, I see in a dark green car, in which it rolls up a few feet behind me to where I was standing. Mind you, there are other cabins in the area as well, so I thought that it was just, like another family that was lost, and wanted to ask where their cabin was or something like that. But when the windows rolled down, it was just some middle-aged guy, and I remember the inside of his car being pretty dirty. He said, "Hey kid, you're not allowed to play baseball here." At this point, I knew this dude was shady, because he didn't drive the white pickup trucks with a campsite logo, so he wasn't security at all, and he was by himself as well, so he had no family with him, no kids or nothing like that. It was just like a dirty-ass car. Also, on top of all of that shady stuff, he had an ultra creepy smile. I just said, "Oh," but he got really creepy when he said, "There's a baseball field on top of that hill." He pointed towards it. "I can take you there. It'll be fun." Then he gave a creepy smile and beckoned me to get inside his car. Now shit got real. I gripped my aluminum bat tighter and made a sort of scowling face at him. He saw this, and I swear he was about to open the car door until he heard and saw my dad laughing and coming out of the cabin, talking to someone on a cell phone. Eventually, the creepy part was that he didn't get angry. The dude looks at me, gives me a smile, and a face that said, "I'll get you next time," and drives away. I sprinted to my cabin, and from then on, clung to my parents, and kept my baby brother and adolescent sister close to me at all times, for the whole entire weekend. Never told them about the guy, though. Oh, and I checked the campsite map on our drive home. There was no baseball field on top of that hill that this creep was talking and pointing to. Instead, there was a picnic table, and next to it dense woods and a creek. We followed him. Some quick background and a disclaimer. Now, this happened sometime between 2006 and 2008, but I remember it pretty vividly. So, my two friends and I were set on planning on a road trip, and there were constant distractions at one of their houses, so we headed out to a road nearby. Now, this road isn't used very much. There's an abandoned factory, a few businesses here and there that were more for storage than anything else, so no one was around much, and a baseball field. A few cars would travel down the road, as it used to be a bit of a shortcut, if you will, in my town, but it still had very little traffic. Naturally, the baseball field seemed like the perfect place to go in late spring. Green grass, the bright sun, and no distractions anywhere around. We could be as crazy as we wanted to. My friends and I sat in the outfield, at the very back of the fence, which was incredibly tall, to prevent stray balls from being launched into the nearby river and getting lost there forever, and near the parking lot, smashing car windows and such. We'd only been sitting there for about 10 minutes when a car pulled into the parking lot. Now, it was a pretty nondescript vehicle, old, gray, boxy, and the only thing that stood out was the huge ass antenna poking up from the roof. But we ignored the older man that got out of the car, walked to the trunk, and took out a goddamn metal detector. He began going through the motions, sweeping the metal detector back and forth over the gravel parking lot. And two things immediately seemed off for me. Now, I will list them out for you. But before that, I just want to say this is all thanks to my dad being a big metal detector buff himself. You know, I knew a lot about it since I was young. So the two things that were off was that, number one, there was no reason for him to be metal detecting in a parking lot, unless he was specifically looking for something he'd lost there during a game or something like that. Our town is pretty historical and offers a lot of good places to detect for relics of actual value. Not here. Number two, he was doing it all wrong. He had no headphones, which many detectors use, and his movements were very quick, too quick, not even giving enough time for him to even find something, even if there was anything there. See, I know my shit. And it was the speed that really alarmed me, and caused me to actually go ahead and alert my friends. He was, in that moment, quickly making his way over towards to us. And even though we had a fence between us, kind of protecting us from this guy, we all felt threatened. So we packed up our road trip planning things and headed to the entrance of the field, trying to actually avoid this guy. But as we did this, the man threw his detector back into his trunk, got into his car, started it, and actually pulled it around to the front of the field as we reached the dugouts. We waited by the dugouts, watching for his car to pull around and move on down the road, but it didn't come. It never came. We didn't know why. We just waited. And the longer we waited and the longer that we listened, we realized he was still there. He was idling on the other side of the dugout. My friends and I were torn, whispering frantically to each other, what should we do? What should we do? Did we go into the dugout for protection? But then we'd effectively be trapped in a concrete cage. Did we make a run for the railroad tracks on the other side of the road and try to sprint to my friend's house, several long blocks away? Did we try to scale the huge fence on the other side of the field, away from the parking lot? And all this? What the hell did we do? Should we do? Finally, we all calmed down enough to call my friend's stepmom and begged her to pick us up. She could tell by my friend's shaken voice that something was actually wrong and this was not a prank or a joke, and thus showed up pretty quickly. But the minutes we waited felt like actual hours. The car still just idled there, not moving, not going anywhere, waiting for us, silently. It was until my friend's stepmom's SUV pulled down the road, and he was off, tearing out the parking lot and down the road, in a cloud of dust, disappearing in the day. Scared at that moment, we climbed in the SUV, told our savior, aka stepmom, what happened, and then asked to borrow the SUV so we could drive to a safer park farther away from that creep and continue our planning so our day doesn't get ruined by this freako. So, about an hour later, we found us pulling into a popular park in our city, which included the community center pool. When we drove by the pool, we saw none other than the now familiar gray car with a huge antenna reaching for the sky. Our metal detector. We slowed, parked, and there he was, going through his usual charade of metal detecting outside of the pool, planning God knows what vicious and evil plans he had. At that moment, he kept poking around in the lawn, glancing up to the pool, kneeling and digging, while not even looking at what he was digging at. Just basically standing there with a goddamn metal detector, just staring at the pool where kids and other people and families and girls and guys were swimming and laughing and totally unaware of this creepy creepo. It was just us that saw him. I don't know how long we waited and just watched, like how he watched us before. But when he got back into his car and pulled away, there was a mutual, unspoken decision. We'd follow him. And so, we follow him. We did. We followed him several blocks before he actually caught on to us. Of course, we weren't very sneaky at all. I mean, we were 3 teenage girls in a huge SUV. He eventually pulled over and glared at us with the most creepy and deafening glare as we drove by him. Our cover was blown, but that was okay. I never wanted to see the creep again anyways. Eventually, we decided, whatever, and just left him on his creepy road. We headed home to speculate about him though, still with imagination and all these thoughts popping up in our head. What was he? Was he a goddamn pedophile? Would he have kidnapped us? Taken us to some cabin somewhere out in the woods and did God knows what? What the hell was with that huge ass antenna on his car? Was he an alien? What was that antenna for anyways? And what about the metal detector gig? Whatever the answers were, we already knew that we never ever wanted to meet him again. P.S. And no, thanks to this guy, we never did finish planning our road trip.